The Office is one of the most influential TV shows of all time, and it changed the way we make mockumentaries entirely. But you already know that, so I'm not going to waste your time explaining that. Today, I want to talk about how The Office died and essentially ruined itself, as you probably guessed by the title. Now, it's no surprise that the later seasons of The Office aren't as good as the early ones, because sitcoms naturally decline in quality over time, and so do most shows as well. Except It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which has remained consistently fantastic for its entire run. And Parks and Recreations, which just got better and better and better. And most British sitcoms, because they don't run on to... whatever! But yeah, The Office really did take a dip in quality in its later seasons, especially the last two, seasons 8 and 9. But to be honest, I could already sense a downfall as far back as season 6. So let's discuss today the downfall of The Office, how and why it declined, and how this amazing comedy completely ruined itself.
Well, this is gonna hurt like a mother.
The most obvious reason as to why The Office started to decline in quality is because the show lost its main star, Steve Carell, and to be honest, the show should have just ended there, but for some reason, it kept going, and honestly, I just failed to see why, as Goodbye Michael was a near perfect way to end his character. But because the show did continue afterwards, the obvious question arose: how are we going to replace Michael? Michael was the heart and soul of the show, and despite it not coming across well, he always meant well, and loved everyone he worked with. Besides Toby, but more on him later. How do you replace the main star, this larger-than-life character that carried the first 7 seasons of the show? You take an existing character, force him into Michael's role, and ruin his character. Wait, that's a terrible idea.
That idea is literally the greatest idea I have ever heard in my life. That idea is terrible.
Yeah, so after Steve Carell left, Andy is made into regional manager of Dunder Mifflin, and to be honest, this just completely ruins his character season 8 onwards, as he basically just becomes a watered down version of Michael, which is just not what Andy was at all. Andy started off working at the other place Jim went at the start of season 3, until he inevitably gets sent away, and that was meant to be it. He wasn't meant to come back, but he did. Now, not gonna lie, at first I was dreading Andy coming back, because in those episodes before his anger management class, I hated him. He was a kiss-ass to Michael, and not in an endearing way like how Dwight used to be. He was short-tempered, and overall his presence was just unpleasant, to be honest. I didn't even really find him that funny, to be honest. Well, besides this. But when he comes back, he's practically a completely different character, while also still being the same. He has a lot of the same traits that he had before, but he's also a lot more empathetic and caring towards others, making him fit in so naturally and effortlessly that I forgot I even hated him. That was until he became regional manager in season 8. Now, on paper, I don't have a problem with this idea. In fact, I'm all for it, because Ed Helms is a great actor who could definitely carry that role out, and Andy himself was the most deserving of all the people that the show had offered. But the problem arises with how they write him in season 8. Now, this isn't the worst that Andy gets, because in this season he's still okay, but he wasn't as good as he was before, and he really did just feel like a shittier version of Michael. Taking an established, well-written character and bashing a new character or changing the old one just to be like that character is not good writing. It's incredibly lazy and straight up shit. It's like how the 10th Doctor is like this perfect character, and the 13th Doctor seeing this decides to try and be like and mold into the 10th Doctor. But it just doesn't fucking work. But in season 8, he wasn't completely awful. He was just made a bit too similar to Michael in a way that doesn't fit his character. In season 9, they completely fuck up Andy's character, and it's horrible to watch unfold. Not only is he a shittier version of Michael to the extent that they tell the same jokes but less funny.
It's sort of an oaky afterbirth.
What was that?
I just got off the phone with my doctor, and it turns out I contracted chlamydia from Aaron.
this doesn't even make sense. He went to Cornell. He's completely reverted back to the Andy in season 3. And not in a good way at all. He returns to being completely unlikable, obnoxious, and downright malicious in some scenes. And there were 2 things he did in particular that made me hate him. His mistreatment of Nellie and refusing to say anything positive about her so that she can adopt a child. Yes, you did hear that right. Andy Bernard, the once kind and caring Andy Bernard, refuses to say anything nice about Nellie so that she can't adopt a child! What the fuck?! Now I get why he would dislike her, because she did just waltz in and steal his job at first, which was a bit of a bitch move, I'm not gonna lie. But this was way too far and malicious, and the rest of the time he's just straight up horrible to her, for no reason. He tries to fire her despite being the one who wanted to keep her on himself.
All right, you sly bastard. When can you start?
He's publicly horrible to her, and then there's this scene.
I wanted to talk to you about our working relationship this year. It's going to be terrible.
Not necessarily.
No, I'm going to make sure that it is.
He's the biggest piece of shit I've ever met in my life, and I've met some big pieces of shit.
And if it isn't, I will take immediate action to rectify that.
That is not fucking funny, you retard.
Who in the hell do you think you are?
I don't like to throw around the B word, but I'm gonna be a huge bitch to you.
What the man?
The other moment that killed Andy for me was how he treats Erin and Plop when they're together in the episode where he finds out. Now, Erin and Andy's relationship itself was something I never really gave a shit about, to be honest. It took up way too much unnecessary screen time, and Erin herself just doesn't really have enough character for her and Andy to work in a relationship. I mean, her character is literally just quirky, stupid, orphan. That's it. So after he ditches her for 3 months to film The Hangover 3, Ed uses instant regret. She dumps him when he gets back, and gets with Plop, and I have absolutely no idea why these two are even together. Like, what actually is there to Plop? He is just devoid of personality. He's probably the worst character in the show. And throughout Erin and Andy's relationship, it's being shown that they still like each other, even while with different people. Why is Andy being gone gonna make any difference? And once Erin and Plop are together, they literally have like 2 more scenes together. And then nothing else. Then what was the point of splitting up Erin and Andy? Anyway, when she dumps him, Andy asks her to pretend to be happy until she is again. What the fuck?
You may not be feeling love for me right now, but if you fake it, I won't be able to tell the difference. So I'll feel good, and then eventually, maybe, you'll actually start to love me again.
This is the face of the clinically insane. If you see this man, do not engage him.
And then he gets the ex of Plop and the ex of Erin in the same room together so that they all argue, and he's completely happy with it.
Does making Aaron and Pete feel bad make me feel better?
He's a simian fool.
No, he's
and
not.
Yeah. Yeah. It does.
And that was, for me, what killed it for Andy, and why he ended up failing as the replacement to Michael Scott. Because, let's just say Michael was in the same contrived position and contrived the exact same situation. It would have some level of good meaning behind it. It wouldn't be mean-spirited, because as angry as Michael could get, there was always some sort of double-edged sword going on, and he was never a malicious character. Sometimes he would go completely overboard with trying to make someone like or appreciate him, but he always meant well. But here, we have his apparent replacement, who's basically just a worse version of him, doing something completely malicious and relishing in it. And Andy isn't the only character that The Office ruined that led to its eventual death. Oh no. Oh no, 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 no.
Will I get over it? No. But life goes on.
If you know me, you know that I'm a characters guy. When it comes to enjoyment, I put characters above everything. Good characters can save a bad story, but bad characters can't. And when it comes to The Office, that becomes extremely apparent in the later seasons, because pretty much every single one of the cast members gets flanderized or ruined in some way. The only characters that don't get ruined are Ryan and Kelly, probably because both Mindy Kaling and BJ Novak wrote for the show itself, so their characters were guaranteed to be in safe hands. Oscar, kind of Creed, kind of Daryl, and Michael, because Michael's just a perfect character really, are all fine from this.
Daryl, everyone seems to be pairing off. Do you want to pretend to be a couple so we get the...
No. Yes. Yes.
But everyone else just becomes a much simplified version of themselves, or they have an aspect of their character ruined to some extent. We already talked about how the show massacred Andy, so let's start with Jim and Pam. Because the characters themselves don't really change in a negative way, it's just a completely unnecessary subplot that's forced onto them, and it's kind of just miserable, to be honest. And it just feels out of nowhere and random, and like I said before, just forced. So, for some reason, Season 9 Jim decides that he wants to move on to bigger and better things. But this sports company thing he wants to do forces him to have to stop working in Paddy's pub in Philly. And throughout the season, we see this take a toll on Jim and Pam's relationship. And my real question is honestly just why? Why would anyone want to see the perfect relationship in The Office almost crash and burn, only to have this stupid subplot dropped because Jim realizes that he loves Pam? Bruh! We already did this in Season 3 when he didn't go for the job running the other branch and went back to Scranton to start dating Pam. What the actual fuck was the point in this? There's no entertainment value in it, it's just miserable to watch, and ultimately it's just a waste of time. They aren't the only ones, and these two are some of the main characters, but even the side characters just get flanderized. Stanley went from the quiet, bored one to the excessively lazy one who just eats and sleeps. Angela goes from a stuck-up Christian who likes her cats to a cat-obsessed mental case who's horrible to pretty much everyone. Meredith goes from a pretty normal person who does a tiny bit of drinking on the side to just an alcoholic whore. Phyllis is just... I don't even know. Creed went from an occasionally weird old man to just a straight-up fucking weirdo. Toby went from a normal, nice, quiet guy who Michael hated for no reason to just a freak who everyone hated for no reason. And the two worst character assassinations that this show did were for Kevin Malone and Dwight Schrute. Let's start with Kevin. Kevin went from a normal dude who everyone thought was stupid because he was a bit slow.
Just my mom's coming in today?
MILF.
Thanks, Kevin.
But he did have some hidden talents that people neglected for his size, as shown in Season 1 with his basketball skills. To just a fat, gluttonous morons whose only traits were wanting to eat food and being dumb. They really did Kevin dirty. Which is honestly a shame because the earlier seasons show a lot of potential for Kevin's character, and it was even implied that he was doing something illegal at work because while he was cheating in poker, said it sounded similar to something he was doing at work. And that, I think, could have led to an interesting story to develop with Kevin. And, oh yeah, remember that Kevin was actually really good at poker? He actually did have skills and talents. He wasn't that stupid to the point where a character could genuinely believe that he was retarded.
He is mentally challenged. But he's doing a super job here.
Wait, back up. Do you think that I'm retarded?
Well, to be honest, some of the jokes with Kevin, while extremely flanderized, are alright. While nearing the end of the show, they just got increasingly annoying and unfunny. And then there's Dwight. My, how they massacred my boy. Dwight's character started off as a pretty simple yet hilarious one. He absolutely simped to Michael because Michael was the boss and had the most power in the office, but besides that he genuinely did like Michael and enjoyed his presence. But after his breakup in Season 4, that was actually pretty good for Dwight as a character for humanizing him. This pretty much destroyed his relationship with him and Michael. Dwight still simps to Michael because it's funny and he has to make people laugh, and it's one of the most proved successful types of jokes in the show, but it all completely depends on what Michael does for Dwight. He doesn't seem like he actually likes Michael. He seems a lot like Andy before his anger management, just simping to try and get power, which isn't the reason why they were funny in the first place. He chastises him, makes fun of him, and he knows how lame Michael really is.
Idiot. Are you calling me an idiot? Don't you ever talk to me that way. You pathetic, short little man. You don't have any friends, or any family, or any land.
All of this is completely contradictory to why Dwight worked and early Andy didn't. They show why their relationship works perfectly in that episode. Because a kiss-ass isn't a fun person to be around. Because they clearly don't care about you, and it's just an annoying thing to deal with. But Dwight wasn't pretending to like Michael, or pretending to like Dunder Mifflin. He genuinely loved both, and that's what made his character and chemistry with Michael work so well. But in the later seasons, that's all gone. He's bitter to Michael constantly, talks down to him, makes him feel like an idiot, and in Michael's final days on the show, just bitches about how Michael didn't recommend him. But I honestly don't get the point of any of this. It isn't remotely funny, it's just... ugh. Like, compare these two scenes of Dwight going to help Michael. Which is funnier?
I'm coming, Michael! I'm gonna save you! Michael is in trouble!
I do not want
Okay? Hold on, Michael! I am coming!
He hit the pole. It's broken, right? He can't.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, Dwight. Oh!
Oh my god.
Hey, fine, I get it. I'll just go by myself.
I'll go, Michael. You'll just screw it up.
He then spends the rest of the episode basically just blaming Michael for all of his problems and his position at Dunder Mifflin, but like... why? Is it because he wasn't co-manager? Surely not, since that position doesn't even exist anymore. He just seems constantly salty that he isn't automatically manager, and that the entire thing is Michael's fault. Yet when Michael is gone, he still whines about it. For something like this to work, you would have to have Dwight understand people. However, like with his relationship with Michael, this is completely contradictory as to why Dwight was funny in the first place. He didn't understand people, and when you have the polar opposite, Jim, against him in the show, that's what led to such comedic value the whole time. That's why Jim's early pranks were so funny. Because not only would they show off Dwight's lack of people skills, when he would try to retaliate, that would also be fucking hilarious. It was one of the most essential parts of his character that made him funny. Another thing that is just completely lost later on is he basically becomes a fucking genius when it comes to people. He knows what they like and he knows what they think. He's successful with the ladies, can regularly outsmart Jim, and completely understands how to piss off Andy by wearing a Cornell jumper. Yeah, that's absolute bullshit. Sorry if I have a hard time believing that this man...
Where's the clitoris? On a website it said at the crest of the labia. What does that mean? What does the female vagina look like?
can pull someone this fit.
What's your blood type?
Oh, negative. Universal donor.
Universal donor.
So basically, Dwight is supposed to be a lame character who thinks he's a genius and really cool, but just gets flanderized as someone who is either uber competent and super cool or just lame and weird. They completely ruin Dwight's character, making him nowhere near as entertaining to watch as he was before. They also make him into a complete simp, but we'll get to that later. But the destruction of Dwight's character isn't the worst thing about this show, because Robert California exists and he was fucking terrible.
But you're gonna be surprised by how ugly it gets. You don't even know my real name. I'm the Lizard King.
Robert California was the character who became the CEO of Dunder Mifflin after Michael left and was replaced by Andy. And we know how bad that was because of what I stated earlier about how it just ruins Andy. And the character of Robert California pretty much ruins this season, because honestly, he just doesn't work. And it's weird that he failed so much, because his introduction at the end of Season 7 was definitely the funniest of all the guest stars the show threw at us. But it was pretty obvious, just from looking at Season 8 and the Season 7 finale, that the show had no idea who it was going to choose to be in charge. Because all of these quote-unquote characters don't really feel like proper fleshed out characters. They just feel like they're skit characters, like someone me or Sam plays in one of our skits. Like, it's pretty much the equivalent if any of the characters that we play, instead of being in 5 to 10 minute skits, was in a full-fledged show. It just wouldn't work, because the characters are so one-note. Same thing happened with Robert California. Now, I won't lie, Robert definitely has his moments. Because it is James Spader, who's a great actor, so I think it would be impossible for him to play a role completely terribly. We don't talk about that time he was in the second worst Avengers film.
You want to start a street fight with me, bring it on, but you're going to be surprised by how ugly it gets. You don't even know my real name. I'm the Lizard King.
But while Spader does play this role really well, the character always comes off as inconsistent, because the show clearly doesn't know what direction they really wanted to go with the character. And whenever they try to humanize him, it never really works, because the character is at his best when he's completely over the top and ridiculous. Sometimes he can come off as a weakling who's scared of people, but then other times he comes off as uber competent and benevolent. But the show never really knows which direction it prefers, and the character is written so inconsistently episode to episode that by the end of season 8, I didn't even really know him. Like, by the end of the first proper season of The Office, season 2, we really don't talk about the other one. You know who all of the characters are by the end of the season. Sure, the show goes and fucks them all up later, but you at least knew who they were. Yet after one season on the show, I don't know who Robert California is. Yet so much of season 8 is reliant on this character. So really, the whole thing just flops. And that's why most people consider season 8 to be one of, if not the worst season of the show. But I'd be lying if I said I thought it was the worst.
Where are the turtles? Where are they?
So while most people consider season 8 to be the lowest point of The Office, for some of the reasons I just listed before, I'd say that season 9 is arguably much, much worse because of the terrible Jim and Pam subplot, the terrible love affair with the Senator Oscar and Angela, and most importantly, well, I say most importantly, most of the worst, the season finale. The last ever episode of The Office. It is terrible closure to the season as a whole, and the show, and is one of the most unsatisfying finales to a TV show I've seen, and yet somehow is the highest rated episode in the show. And honest to God, I don't know why. So as predictable as ever, the show ends with pretty much all of the characters getting their perfect happy ending, and it's such a really self-indulgent blah blah blah. And it's pretty much just meant to be a big victory lap for this show being one of the best sitcoms ever, with its successful run and its brilliant characters. But that's the thing. I don't really care about any of these characters at this point, because the show just ruined them all in its last 2 seasons. Or even further back than that. I don't feel happy for Dwight and Angela getting married, because Angela's a horrible 2-time and manipulative bitch, who took advantage of Dwight and Andy. Like, I don't even see why Dwight would want to get back with her, considering he's been over her since season 6. It just comes out of nowhere because he thinks Philip is his kid, and it just makes his already existing relationship that an episode set up superfluous. This show has a pattern of making relationships seem pointless, doesn't it? Like, boiled down, a large chunk of this finale is just sitting around and talking about how great the show is. But the show has been so wank for so many episodes and stories at this point that the finale is just extremely unsatisfying. The way to do a victory lap better is shown much better in the last episode of the 10th Doctor's era of Doctor Who, and The Office could have made a similar thing work. One of the last scenes in the 10th Doctor's final story is the Doctor going around the world to see his companions and people he's travelled with before he goes off to his death. Now, while obviously The Office can't deal with the death of one of its main characters, it would work if the episode focused on Michael taking a visit back to Scranton as part of Dwight's wedding, and the episode could be him catching up with everyone, many years later from when he last seen them, instead of him just having like 2 scenes, and not even in the final self-indulgent one. Like, it's so weird. He just appears and disappears. And not gonna lie, Michael's last ever joke in the show wasn't even that funny.
I feel like all my kids grew up, and then they married each other. It's every parent's dream.
But the difference with The End of Time and The Office finale is that The End of Time has its story of its own, that it tells and concludes, has a little part by the victory lap, and a much more deserved one. The Office finale is just an attempted victory lap, with no real story, trying to solve and shove in as many series plot points as it can, while being one of the least satisfying endings to a show ever. Seriously, what a letdown. While The End of Time was a perfect victory lap, The Office finale is the equivalent if I just cut off my foot and just slowly bled out around a track and then died when I finished. Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Myself to sleep, Jim. False. I do not miss him.
In conclusion, The Office was one of the greatest sitcoms of all time that went on far too long and essentially ruined itself because of its prolonged longevity. The show should have ended after Michael left, because not only was he the most integral part of the show, he was the only one to get satisfying closure, which would have been a perfect place to end it all, but instead, the show just kept going, ruining its characters by Flanderising them, forcing them into unnecessary damaging subplots, and generally just misunderstanding why they were great in the first place, straying way too far away from the original premise of the show, doing that standard sitcom trope of trying to make everything bigger, more bombastic, and completely over the top, so much that it just exits the realms of reality, and just becomes stupid. The Office was meant to be a show about normal people working a boring job. It wasn't meant to be about tranquilizing a co-worker and throwing him down some stairs. It wasn't about climbing on the roof of a building to avoid a conversation with the boss. It wasn't about hanging off a bike on a telephone wire, hiring people to commit crimes, or any more stupid shit that the later seasons do. The Office was at its best when it was a little show with a larger-than-life lead trying to make these normal people happy. But as the show went on, it lost that charm completely, and overall, when I finished the show, I wasn't sad that it was over like I am with most shows I finish. I was just happy that that miserable experience was over, and I didn't have to watch the show struggle for another 22 episodes. And the last 2 seasons just left an overall bad impression of the show for me. Every time I go on YouTube and find an Office clip in my recommended from the first couple seasons, I'm always like, oh yeah, the show was actually funny. If you're wondering how the show's season's qualities stand overall, Season 1 is alright. Seasons 2 to 5 are the peak of the show. Seasons 6 and 7 are a downgrade, but still passable, but Seasons 8 and 9 are truly terrible, and they ruined the show. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, as I'm aware it's very different compared to what I usually do, but I do like covering other shows and films, like in the Pirates video, because it's so refreshing compared to what I usually make, which I do enjoy making, but making stuff off topic is quite refreshing. But anyway, like and subscribe if you enjoyed, but if you didn't enjoy it, dislike and comment and tell me why you didn't enjoy it, because then I can improve in the future. Anyways, just wanted to get that off my chest. Goodbye!
I happen to be losing weight on my own for my own reasons. The truth is, I have lost a little of my speed, a little of my fire.
No, this is not happening. This is an abomination.
I'm not doing that again. You got me down, you gotta get me back up.
No.
I put 17 damn years into this company, and now they're making me climb damn mountain.
It's funny because he's fat.
I drove my car into a lake.